Violence, riots, escape, and corruption. Probably seen your share of crazy prison stories in the movies, but sometimes truth can be stranger than fiction. Here are the top 10 craziest events to ever have taken place in real-life prisons. Number 1. The Attica Prison Riot. First on the list is one of the most controversial and bloody prison riots ever. In 1971, prisoners at the Attica Correctional Facility in New York State started a riot seeking better living conditions and political rights.
The conditions were horrific. The temperature sometimes got to be 119 degrees. People made 56 cents a day. They were allowed one shower every 2 weeks.
Over 1,000 inmates took control of the prison, taking 42 staff members hostage and inflicting massive damage to the facility.
It wasn't planned, it was spontaneous. I came out of the shower and everything was different.
Conditions in the prison were poor, and the Black Power movement that had gained popularity at the time was prevalent in this facility. Both inside and outside of prisons, the government pushed back against a lot of civil rights activities.
Because of this pushback, the prisons were being filled with people that were involved in the movements.
After days of failed negotiations, armed officers stormed the prison.
When they stormed the prison, they came in dropping gas and shooting guns.
During the firefight that followed, over 40 people were shot and killed, including 10 correctional officers and civilian employees. Over 30 inmates were also killed in the chaos, making it one of the bloodiest prison riots in American history. The riots led to several short-lived improvements to standards of living in U.S. prisons, but remains one of the most infamous events in American prison history.
Over a course of about 2 or 3 days, we tried to negotiate with the authorities.
Number 2. The Battle of Huska. You've probably heard a lot about the tragic war in Syria over the past few years, but you may not have heard about one of the most shocking battles to have taken place over the course of the war. In 2022, a large-scale Islamic State attack took place on the Alcatraz prison in Huska. The prison housed several high-ranking IS leaders and hundreds more IS fighters. It was targeted in a deliberate breakout attempt where hundreds of IS members, both inside and outside of the prison, launched a full-scale attack.
The ongoing battle over an attempted prison break by ISIS militants in northeast Syria. The fighting now spreading from the prison to neighboring houses.
350 IS fighters were killed in the battle, but they were able to free several important leaders from the prison.
This is the moment ISIL detainees escaped from prison in northern Syria. For 4 days, ISIL fighters have attempted to free their fellow members. It's unclear how many have managed to escape. How many have been killed or recaptured by Kurdish forces.
Approximately 400 other inmates managed to escape. The attack was considered to be a major victory for the Islamic State. Number 3. The Cowra Breakout. In 1944, one of the largest and most violent prison escapes ever took place in Australia when hundreds of Japanese POWs turned on their guards and carried out a mass breakout. Many radicalized Japanese soldiers in the Second World War viewed their own capture as highly dishonorable. In an attempt to redeem themselves and gain their freedom, they planned a riot and escape attempt. During the dead of night, prisoners charged the camp gates armed with makeshift weapons and tools and began to break through the camp's fences and charge down prison guards. Despite being armed with heavy machine guns, several guards were quickly overwhelmed and killed by the massive Japanese charge. In total, 4 Australian soldiers and 231 Japanese prisoners were killed in the escape. Over 500 did manage to escape, but were all either killed, recaptured, or committed suicide within a couple of weeks. Number 4. New Mexico State Penitentiary Riot. Another contender for the most violent riot in U.S. history is the New Mexico State Penitentiary Riot of 1980. In the early hours of the morning, a few prisoners erupted into a frenzy of violence after getting drunk on homemade liquor.
When hardcore inmates in cell block 5 overpowered their guards, smashed their way into the control center, and in a few short minutes controlled the entire penitentiary.
Overcrowding and poor prison services led to a mass riot where prisoners attacked not only guards, but each other too. Unlike the Attica riot that had been organized with solidarity among prisoners, the New Mexico State Pen riot was in part an attempt by some prisoners to attack snitches in the prison. Inmates also took several hostages. Many suffered brutal physical and sexual abuse at the hands of the rioters. After authorities eventually regained control of the prison, the horrific violence that had taken place was revealed.
33 prisoners were found dead at the hands of their fellow inmates. Others were wounded or overdosed on drugs. Guards who were taken hostage were finally released.
Bodies of decapitated, burnt, and mutilated inmates were found across the prison. It remains one of the most shocking events to ever occur in U.S. prison history.
Blood and mutilated bodies strewn about the halls of New Mexico State Penitentiary.
Number 5. The Huntsville Prison Siege.
In the state penitentiary in Huntsville, Texas, armed convicts have seized 11 hostages. A spokesman says 8 convicts are involved, and the prison chaplain is trying to convince them to surrender.
In 1974, a prison uprising took place in Huntsville, Texas, where 15 prison workers and inmates were taken hostage by a group of violent criminals. Led by former heroin kingpin and murderer Fred Carrasco, the 3 men smuggled pistols and ammunition into the prison and took control of the part of a prison, leading to an 11-day standoff with the police.
The Texas State Penitentiary at Huntsville is under siege tonight for the second straight night. Inside, convicts with guns are holding hostages, some of whom are women.
As near as reporters can get to the only back gate area of the Huntsville unit. And if Fred Carrasco should make his break to freedom, this is the way he would have to come.
After days of waiting, the inmates eventually attempted to escape using a makeshift shield consisting of books taped to mobile blackboards. The men surrounded themselves with hostages and attempted to make it out to a getaway vehicle. However, after authorities blasted the convicts with fire hoses, chaos ensued and 2 women were executed. Prison officials fired upon Carrasco, who chose to commit suicide during the shootout rather than surrender. Number 6. The Guayaquil Prison Riot. If you thought the U.S. prison riots were shocking, wait until you hear about this one. In 2021, chaos broke out at the largest prison in Ecuador in the city of Guayaquil. Confrontations between criminal gangs sharing the prison escalated into full-scale war when explosives were set off by the prisoners.
The president has declared a state of emergency after one of the country's deadliest prison riots.
Gang warfare soon erupted as different groups fought each other to take control of the prison. Horrific violence was reported that included executions and beheadings.
At least 118 people killed and 80 injured.
After a couple of days of violence, hundreds of armed police and soldiers entered the prison to pacify rioters. Just a couple of months later, another riot broke out at the prison where 68 prisoners were killed. The prison is largely considered to be the most dangerous in the world due to these 2 unimaginably violent events. Number 7. The Alcatraz Escape. One of the most infamous prisons in history, Alcatraz was designed to be escape-proof. Located on the island off the San Francisco Bay Area, it housed some of the most dangerous criminals in the U.S. Despite being supposedly escape-proof, 3 inmates somehow managed to get off the island in June of 1962. Late at night, Frank Morris and brother John and Clarence Anglin tucked papier-mâché heads resembling their own likeness into their beds, snuck into ventilation ducts, and departed the island on an improvised inflatable raft. Frank Morris, the likely mastermind of the escape, was considered by some to be a genius. He reportedly had an IQ of 133, placing him in the top 2% of the population in terms of intelligence. It is unknown what happened to the 3 men after their escape. Some believe that they drowned crossing the water, while others believe that they made it across to safety. None of the men were ever tracked down and remain on the U.S. wanted list to this day. We may never know whether the 1962 Alcatraz escape ended in disaster or was ultimately a perfectly executed escape attempt. Number 8. The Altameda Jail Riot. Another brutal prison riot broke out into the Altameda prison, Brazil in 2019. Much like the Guayaquil riots, the violence was triggered by gang-related tensions as different groups tortured and murdered their rivals throughout the prison.
At least 57 people were killed as rival gangs battled for 5 hours yesterday.
The prison had only 33 guards watching over 450 prisoners. Vastly outnumbered inmates took their chance and took control of the prison, setting huge parts on fire and carrying out mass murders and violence. Many prisoners soon became trapped as fires spread. Over 40 people reportedly died from smoke inhalation.
The others suffocated after part of the prison was set on fire, preventing guards from accessing the prison for several hours.
By the end of the riot, 16 more bodies were found beheaded across the prison. The shocking events remain one of the worst prison riots in Latin American history. Number 9. The Maze Prison Escape. During the horrific period of violence in Northern Ireland known as the Troubles, the biggest prison escape in UK history occurred when 38 IRA members broke out from Maze Prison in 1983.
The Maze was reputedly Europe's most secure jail, a prison within an army camp.
In total, 38 suspected paramilitary fighters managed to escape after smuggling weapons into the prison and attacking their guards. The men stole staff uniforms, hijacked a lorry, took several hostages before finally making it over the prison's fences to freedom. Several guards were shot and stabbed during the breakout, and one person died during the violence. Most of the escapees were eventually rounded up, although 2 men were never found. Number 10. The Great Escape. You may have heard of this one from the Steve McQueen classic movie, but the story of the Great Escape is actually true. In 1944, RAF leader Roger Bushell planned a daring mass escape from the Stalag Luft 3rd prisoner of war camp. The escape attempt occurred in the early hours of March 25th when inmates used a 9-meter deep tunnel that they had dug underground to crawl to freedom. Prisoners at the camp included Allied troops from all over the world. The men worked together over months to attempt to escape before they were finally able to complete the tunnel. Over 600 prisoners were involved in the construction of the tunnels, which were dug using stolen materials such as bedboards and tin cans. In total, 76 men were able to escape during the night, the 77th being spotted by guards as he emerged from the tunnel on the outside of the camp fence. 73 of the 76 escapees were recaptured not long after their escape. Hitler ordered that more than half of them be shot and killed as an example to other potential escapees. In total, 50 men from the 13 nations were executed. That concludes our countdown of the 10 craziest events to ever happen in prison. Which one did you find the most unbelievable? And did we miss any? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching.